Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are tuning in from. We appreciate you being here. This is Backyard Buckets, brought to you by Backyard Sports with another off-season edition. Here to talk some NBA, some FIBA World Basketball Cup. I've got Ryan here with me. How we doing, bud?
I'm doing good. A little under the weather, as you know, um, but I'm okay. Hopefully, I get through this with my mind intact. How
If
about
not,
you?
if not, I'll jump on the crazy train with you, and we can just see where this thing ends up. Yeah.
All right, that sounds good.
All right. So this evening we have a little international basketball talk for you, as well. We're going to follow that up with some another division preview. Hello, welcome to the show. Welcome back.
Hey, Dad.
Gary is not with us tonight, but we do appreciate the fans still tuning in.
Yes.
Uh, like I said, we're going to talk FIBA World Cup, your champions, your runner-up, how the U.S. fared, what they need to do going forward, type deal. And then we're going to have another division preview like the boys brought you last week. This week we're going over the Central Division of the Eastern Conference. So we'll go over those teams, kind of remind you what happened this offseason, and then give our thoughts on whether that was a splash or a trash offseason. All right. So World Cup. The final happened. Brian gave out a pick last week. He picked Serbia over Canada. He was correct. And then Serbia did not win the final. They lost to Germany. Old Dennis Schroeder with his patch of blonde hair showed up and showed out. MVP for the tournament this year. Ryan, was that surprising to you? I know that you picked Serbia to be in the finals. Was it surprising to you that Germany beat Serbia?
No, I think Germany was a much better matchup against Serbia than Canada was. Um, I think Serbia did the things to beat Canada that you had to do. They had to rebound, they had to run the floor, and that's what Serbia does pretty well. I think that was actually the U.S. weakness in a lot of ways too. Rebounding. We know if you've been on social media at all, people talk about the U.S. team not being able to rebound. Um, but yeah, I think Germany and Serbia were built very similarly. Germany was just longer and just more talented in general. So it's not shocking. It also didn't shock me that Serbia made it close.
Yeah.
They came back at the end of the game. Uh, I think if they got a better game out of Bogdanovich, they probably win. He was just okay, and he really is their offensive, machine. But no, it doesn't shock me. Germany's got a lot of talent.
Yes, they do. Yeah, and Germany outscored Serbia 22-10 in the third quarter, and that's tough for any team to come back from. We saw it for many years with the Golden State Warriors. Um, they'd send that death lineup out right after halftime and just kind of pull away in the third quarter of games, and teams would really struggle to come back. Even though Serbia did win the fourth quarter in this game, but like you mentioned, Germany just had so much talent across the board. A lot of NBA guys on that roster. I mentioned Dennis Schroeder, of course. Daniel Tice is out there as well. Sure, establishing world dominance. Yes, very scary thought.
Third time's a charm.
Yeah, we'd hate to see more roads in the world. That would be for sure. Um, so you did pick Serbia to beat Canada, right?
Yep.
Do you have a? I apologize for not hearing whether you gave a reason for that last week. I was out, obviously. Can you kind of run me through your thoughts there of why you picked Serbia to beat Canada?
Um, well, I kind of mentioned it a little bit just a second ago. I thought that Serbia had a good matchup against Canada. Canada much better on paper. There's NBA guys all up and down that lineup, and there's like three D1 guys that are like just not NBA guys, but are still very good. I thought that Serbia, if they could dodge a Canadian shooting night that puts them away, I thought they had a good chance of dominating inside with their size. Because Kelly Olynyk, is not going to give up a lot of resistance to a traditional big,
Right.
rebounding, scoring around the basket, those types of things. So I thought that was a pretty big weakness. And in FIBA rules, going small is not as beneficial as it is in NBA rules.
Right.
So I thought Serbia had a little bit of an advantage there. I think SGA was bound to have a normal game.
Yeah.
That was a little
Not
bit of it too.
otherworldly.
Yeah, he arguably was the best player in the entire tournament. And yeah, I thought if they could get out and run a little bit, it would cause problems for Canada. And they did enough to win the game. I think Canada's a better team. I think if they played each other 5 times, it's probably like a 3-2 to Canada. But I just thought that people were giving too much credit to the Canadian team. So I kind of took my shot there. I think Serbia was like an 8.5 point dog, which I thought was kind of wild.
Yeah. To win outright, that's a lot. That's very impressive.
It's because there's like three. It's the Serbian B team, right? Like there's a lot of big name guys not playing on that Serbian team. One specific, really big.
One specifically
not playing.
Big name, big guy.
Yeah, and but you know, Serbia's got big dudes all over that country that can play on their professional team, on their international team. So it didn't surprise me. And it also, like I said, didn't surprise me that Germany was able to match up better with them because they're actually better suited for FIBA rules than both the American and the Canadian team were, in my opinion.
Right, absolutely. All right, let's shift a little bit from the Serbian and Canadian teams to one that is a little more near and dear to our hearts, Team USA. Obviously, they kind of went over there, and we knew going in that this was not the best team that we could have fielded, right? There were a lot of guys that didn't want to play because, or for any myriad of reasons, right? Whether they had long, deep NBA playoff runs, or they were just gearing up to get ready for next season, or maybe they didn't get invited. Who knows, truly. But Ryan, do you see any cause for concern? And obviously, this is coming out after LeBron has said he's going to assemble the Avengers to go to Paris next year.
Yep.
But does just kind of seeing the way that other teams play the international game compared to the way the United States played in this FIBA Cup, do you have any trepidation going into Paris next year?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we're like, oh, they're bringing the big guns. Well, a lot of those big guns are ancient. And will be even older to next year. Not to say that they're over the hill, but the international teams are also going to bring their big guns. Like most of these teams brought their B teams, C teams in some situations. So yeah, I mean, should they be the favorites? Yes. Are they expected to run through everybody and win by 25? Like, I think that's a ridiculous assumption that a lot of people still think is going to happen. I mean, the best players in the world are international players, and it's just how it is right now. Outside of maybe Steph, if Steph's there, like, there's probably competitive star power. But if Jokic is playing, if Giannis is playing, right, those guys didn't play. Luka played, but you expect the rest of his team to be better. Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't shock me if they don't gold medal again. Is what I would say. They should, but it wouldn't shock me if they don't.
Right, I agree, and I think you made a good point when talking about this FIBA Cup. You had mentioned that going small in the international game does not benefit teams the way that it does in the NBA. So many of the superstars that play for Team USA or will potentially play for Team USA are going to be smaller guys, right? Like, your biggest guy coming out of the United States is likely to be Bam Adebayo, because Cat played for the Bahamian team, right?
Yeah.
So we're not going to have him. We'll probably get Walker Kessler back, right, for big man depth. But like, if our starting center is Bam Adebayo, how does that match up against teams like France, even Germany with Daniel Tice, who's larger than Bam is, and Serbia we mentioned with Jokic probably playing in the Olympics. There's going to be some front court deficiencies I would imagine going into the games next summer, into the Olympics, that the U.S. has to address. I think that trying to convince Joel Embiid to play for Team USA is likely our best bet to win the gold next year. Aside from that, you also mentioned Steph, who's actually never played in the Olympics before. So who knows what he's going to look like going into international ball if we've never seen him on that stage before, right? Not that I think the stage will be too big for him, but it is a different game that he just is not necessarily accustomed to.
Yep. Yeah, I think it'd be tougher for him to score for sure.
Yeah, I agree with the comment there, and I think there's one key contributing factor to that, at least in my opinion. It was the stepping down of Coach K, because he had been the driving force of that team for, what did he coach Team USA for 15 plus years, something like that? I mean, he'd been there forever, right? Yeah, so with Grant Hill taking over Team USA operations, bringing in Steve Kerr as a first-time international head coach, I mean, it was going to be tough going in. And like you mentioned, it seems tough to assemble the best team, right? You and I had both talked about, we didn't send our best team. We sent maybe our C squad over there. You know, Mikal Bridges, I think, rated out as the highest Team USA player to play in this World Cup. And Mikal Bridges is not even one of the 20 best guys in the NBA. Not even 20 best American guys in the NBA. If I were to pull up a list right now, most likely. Yep. So that being said, I think that you and I both have very real concern about Team USA going into the Olympics next year for all the reasons that you laid out. And then, like I said, the front court depth, I think, could be an issue for us. All of that being said, Team USA should be favored. Yep. We have the most depth of talent for one country, right?
Yep.
But who knows what's going to happen, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it's one major weakness, right? It's like you can't play Banchero at the 5 and expect to beat a Nikola Jokic-led team. But like,
maybe he can do it all.
yeah. He wasn't actually that bad at the 5. I was surprised. He actually looked okay. He's not amazing there, but
right.
When they went small, you know, he could play the 5. I think that is the major weakness. But if that's your only weakness, like, you're a pretty good team. Because like, if I go, the Canadian team's got way more weaknesses. They have the same weakness plus more. And the Canadian team, a lot of people think is one of the top, 5 teams when they actually bring their best. So
yeah,
U.S. should win, but Patrick Ewing's not walking through the door anymore. So
it's true.
It's a different world.
It's very, very true. So that was our FIBA World Cup review. Shout out to Germany. Shout out Dennis Schroeder.
No blonde streak, if you didn't notice. He got rid of it.
Yeah, well.
A
bit of it doesn't count.
That was a European thing for, like, because Clint Capella had that for a while, and he's Swiss. And it was like the European style was put a blonde streak through your hair.
Yeah. You can't make the ball in the green in 2 swings, unless it's a par 3. Let me tell you what. And even then,
I only win by not playing this.
High score wins, right? That's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this evening. We're going to go over, like I said, the Central Division of the Eastern Conference in the NBA. For those that don't know which teams that they are, or that is off the top of your head, we're looking at Milwaukee, Cleveland, Chicago, Indiana, and Detroit. Milwaukee, obviously the 1 seed from last year. We're looking to determine whether we like their offseason, the moves they made. Same for the rest of the teams, obviously, but you got 3 playoff teams last year out of this division, right? You had Milwaukee at the 1, Cleveland was your 4 seed, and then Chicago played in the play-in. They were a 9 seed. They didn't make any noise. Kind of not shocking to anybody, really. I was not high on them going into the season. Spoiler, I will not be high on them going into next season either. But let's get into this. So we have Milwaukee as your 1 seed, right? They went 58-24, finished first in the division, first in the conference. So they're notable offseason moves this year. They re-signed Chris Middleton, 3 years, $102 million. They re-signed Brooke Lopez, 2 years, $48 million. 35-year-old Brooke Lopez, by the way. They also signed Robin Lopez, his brother, also 35 years old, to a $1.3 million deal. They signed Malik Beasley to a $1.2 million deal for 1 year. They signed Andre Jackson, who they drafted, to his rookie deal. It's a 4-year deal. They signed Chris Livingston, who was a second-round pick, to his rookie deal as well. And they also signed Jake Crowder for $3.2 million. Ryan, was this – well – do you have any moves that I did not catch before I asked you the question?
I mean, you can say who they didn't bring back. They lost Javon Carter. I think that's probably a big loss for them. They lost Joe Ingles, a little bit of a loss there. And bringing in Adrian Griffin to coach the team. Technically, I guess that would be an off-season move. So
I forgot to write that one down. Good call.
Yeah, that would be my ads there.
Okay, so now that we've kind of touched on the major additions and subtractions there, I gotta ask, do you splash or splash? Wow, splash or trash? How do we feel about this offseason?
Are we smashing or passing the buck?
Yeah, smash or pass the Bucks, baby.
I've always been a big Deer fan. This one's tough. I'm kind of in the middle. Like I think you could take either side very quickly and justify it very easily. They did what they had to do by re-signing their second and fourth best player. But I agree, this roster is aging very quickly.
Yeah.
And that's a concern. But what do you do about that, right? You just re-sign until the guys can't play anymore. I mean, that's all you can really do at this point. So based off the situation they were in, really the only major negative is losing Javon Carter. I think that'll hurt a little bit off the bench. But I think adding Adrian Griffin is going to be interesting to see what offense he decides to run. A lot of people critique Budenholzer in the playoffs and the way he runs the team in the playoffs. I was not as critical, but I see why he doesn't do a lot of adjustments in the playoffs. Yeah, I'm going to splash just because they did what they had to do. I think you could very easily say they didn't do enough to differentiate themselves, but they're one of the best teams in the East. They're going to be, as long as they're healthy, they're going to be in the conversation. So you can't be mad about them not doing too much.
Yeah, for sure. Their projected starting five going into the season next year is Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, Giannis, Brooke Lopez. And I'm going to take a second and introduce the fifth member of their starting lineup. This is a player who I would like to take a step back and mention a musician that I believe resides in Utah now these days. And if I remember correctly, his first hit single was White Iverson. And as we all know, Allen Iverson wore number 3 famously. And the same player in the starting lineup has adopted the number 3 that he once wore in college. And that is none other than White Iverson himself, Grayson Allen. At one time, most outstanding player in the Final Four, national champion from Duke University. Of course, he will be their starting 2 guard in this rotation.
And a beloved player. I mean, people love him.
Yeah, I mean, he's a grit and grind kind of guy, right? He would have played great with Zebo down there in Memphis for many years. He is. I did mention he was most outstanding in the Final Four, right? Which is great for him. But he comes into the NBA where he's a little undersized, right? But he has very real athleticism for, just be honest, for a white guy. But he does he makes a lot of hustle plays for that team, and he's a very good shooter, right? So he kind of fills the cracks where it's not only up to Drew to guard the ball handlers on the other team. I think he's very valuable to that roster. But you mentioned that team is aging. 35-year-old Brooke Lopez is not going to be Defensive Player of the Year for too much longer, right? I mean, he can be a very valuable defender and take pressure off of Giannis, let Giannis kind of play that free safety role in their defensive sets. And then you have Drew obviously on the outside, and then Chris is not a bad defender, but I believe he's going to be 31 going into the season, maybe 32. And he's had injury history the last couple seasons. It's like, how long can his body hold up, right? You don't really know. But all that being said, I do like the moves they made this offseason. I think that you were the number one seed for a reason last year, and then you're bringing almost everyone back, and you're bringing in a new coach for a breath of fresh air, right? To potentially run new offenses there to keep things fresh in the playoff. For all of those reasons, I'm going to say it was a splash offseason for them. I like the moves. I expect them to be potentially the one seed again next year. But, things always happen. You never know for sure. We had a question earlier. Injuries are always a concern for American players.
Yep.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is due to the fact that in past years we've typically sent our best players, right? Those best players tend to have long playoff runs. So you play an 82 game season, potentially a 100-game season if you make a playoff run, right? And then you don't really have a real offseason. You jump almost right into Team USA training camp, and then you go play these intense international games. That's a lot of wear and tear on the human body. And unfortunately, that could rear its ugly head next year going into the Olympics. Ryan, do you think the injuries are like a huge concern for American players?
I think it's a concern for everybody that plays in the NBA. Dennis Schroeder famously did not play for Germany, I believe, in the Olympics because they would not pay his insurance policy. I believe I have that story correct. So it's just a much larger problem because the Americans are all NBA guys who all probably make max deals or close to max deals, and their bodies are how they make their money. So it's understandable to be like, well, if I tear my ACL in a contract year, how much money am I losing? And all I get is a medal. So yeah, it's understandable. I don't blame anyone for not wanting to play. I do find the motivation of like loss really interesting. It's like, well, we can't lose, so we got to come back and like dominate whether we're hurt or not. And it's like you have to do that all the time now, or you're just going to keep losing. Like, like you can't just be like, we're going to lose the World Cup and then come back and win the Olympics.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, LeBron's got to be concerned. He's going to be 40, like going into the Olympics. Is he going to be like, well, my career's over if I get a major injury? There's a lot to consider there. So yeah, I do think it's a larger problem for the higher paid guys, which is NBA guys. So
yeah, I agree. All right, moving on to our number 2 team in the division, the Cavaliers. Cleveland Cavaliers finished second in their division, fourth in the Eastern Conference last year at 51-31, 20 games over 500. Not bad. They re-signed Karis LeVert. They extended him 2 years, $31 million. They signed Georges Niang to 3 years, $26 million. They acquired Max Strus from the Miami Heat and signed him to a 4-year, $63 million deal. They signed Ty Jerome, who's a player that I really like, to a 2-year, $5 million deal. They signed Imani Bates, who was their second-round draft pick, to a 2-way deal, so he may get some run with the NBA squad, but likely to be playing in the G League. They also signed Tristan Thompson just last month to a 1-year, $3.2 million deal. Get some front court depth in there, maybe some Kardashians on the sideline. And I have here that they traded away Chetty Osman, who I thought was a pretty large rotation player for them. He's down to San Antonio now. I've always kind of liked Chetty Osman. He's a non-traditional player. He's not a great player, but he was a non-traditional player. And he was one of the glue guys for them, did a lot of the dirty work, and had developed a pretty decent perimeter jump shot too from the games that I don't have stats to back that up, but it's just the games that I watched, and they were pretty high on my League Pass viewing appointments last year. Did I miss anything, Ryan? Have we not covered some of these offseason moves?
I think we'd be remiss to not bring up one of our friends and coworkers' favorite player, Robin Lopez, not on the team anymore. He's on the Bucks, which we talked about.
Yes.
So Cleveland has moved down on our mutual friends tier list of teams to watch.
Yes. Shout out BK.
No, I think you hit it all. There's a lot of moves, but I think you got them.
All right. So that being said, Ryan, splash or trash?
So I'm gonna start by not answering the question, which is how I like to do it.
Nice.
The Michael Scott. Sometimes I talk and I don't know what I'm gonna say at the end.
Whatever you do, always, without a doubt, never ever, with any hesitation,
ever.
And
I mean ever. Yeah, that's me. And every time I talk to someone I've never talked to before. Yeah, so I think the Chetty Osman loss is a pretty big one, actually. I think I agree with you. I like Chetty a lot. I think he's a really good glue piece. He's a pretty good passer for his size. He actually reminded me of a guy I talk about a lot, Denny Avdia, but with a better jumper. They have like a similar game. Chetty just has a better stroke, and that matters a lot to get playing time in the NBA.
Are you saying that Chetty's stroke game is elite? Is that
yeah.
Oh,
yep.
Nice.
Yep, his stroke game is elite. Yeah, Turkish fans love that. So yeah, I think that hurts him. They replace him with a gorgeous Niang, and that's what I call him, and Max Strus. I guess it's like we want just guys who that's all they do is shoot, because that's all those guys do. They're like similar shooters, like slightly better than Osman. Osman provides other things, I think. Strus provides like similar length, but really not a lot of athleticism. So I think that kind of is a wash, in my opinion.
Sure.
I think I do like the Ty Jerome at. I think he's a contributing NBA player. I think he handles, off the bench pretty well, can run a second team and not really do too much to get in the way of what you're trying to do. And I think that's important coming off the bench. So yeah, I guess I'll splash them by a small amount. I'm not as bullish on their offseason as a lot of other people are. I think this is like a diver splash, as small as possible to get the highest score. But yeah, I still think this team's really good. As you know, I'm a big Evan Mobley fan. I think this team's got a very bright future with Mitchell and Garland and Mobley as their centerpieces. And I like the win now attitude. I just like, why couldn't you have Osman and Strus? I don't know if Georges Niang does much for me.
Yeah.
Outside of shooting. Yeah.
All right. So their projected starting lineup going into next season: Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Strus, Mobley, and Jared Allen. I agree that I'm not as bullish on this offseason, and for that reason, I will give them a trash. I really, in our free agency recap pod, I mentioned that I really did not like the Karis LeVert signing. I didn't think he was a net plus to that team last year. He was a ball stopper with the second unit. He was not an efficient scorer. He's not a good defender. I didn't really understand why they chose to give him $32 million. I thought that money could have been used elsewhere. They obviously found some cash to give to Max Strus, who I'm very interested in seeing outside of the Miami system, right? He's a hard-nosed guy. He's a really good defender. He plays super hard all the time. I like the team. I don't like the offseason, right? Like, I really like their starting five. I think they probably could have one of the best starting fives in the NBA. But the pieces around them are not necessarily the guys that I would look forward to win championships, right? Like Niang, you mentioned it, kind of a wash there, losing Osman, adding Niang. I would have rather had Osman. Continuity's sake, right? He's played with these guys before. He understands how it works. And the LeVert signing really just, like, if they had done nothing else but signed LeVert, I probably still would have given them a trash. Honestly, I'm just not a LeVert fan. I am interested to see if Imani Bates will get run with the NBA squad. I think he balled out in the Vegas league, in the summer league. He was very good for them. So I'm curious to see. He's got all the talent in the world. It's whether he can put it together. He's got the size, the length, the athleticism. Just kind of who knows what's going to happen whenever he steps on an actual NBA court to play with actual NBA players, right? All right, moving on now. We're coming down to our third and final playoff team in this division, Chicago Bulls. They were 40-42 last year, made the playoffs with a losing record. Shocker, they play in the East. So in 2019, they gave Vucevic a $100 million deal. This year, they extended him for another 3 years and another $60 million. They re-signed their first-round draft pick in Kobe White to a 3-year, $36 million deal. You mentioned the Bucks lost Javon Carter. Well, he did sign with the Bulls, 3 years, $19.5 million. They signed a draft pick, Julian Phillips, right? Draft pick? Question mark. I never really got confirmation on that.
I think he was a undrafted.
Was he
undrafted? No, I think he was drafted.
He was a second-round pick, I believe.
Yeah.
But they signed him to a 4-year deal, kind of the rookie deal, right? They also signed former draft pick Ayo Dosunmu out of Indiana, a guy Illinois. Oh boy, that's going to bother me. I think it's Illinois.
He's from Illinois, yeah.
Illinois, yeah. 3-year, $21 million. And then maybe the most impactful offseason move of this team was not a move at all. It was declaring Lonzo Ball out for the season with injury. I think that is very impactful for this team.
Yep.
Any moves that I missed there, Ryan?
Torrey Craig. I didn't hear you say.
I did not mention Torrey Craig.
I think Torrey Craig's a contributing player, so
right.
They brought him in. They lost Patrick Beverly. They lost. Yep. They lose Javonte Green. They lose Derek Jones. That's really their big moves.
Yeah. All right. All of that being said, splash or trash?
Julian Phillips was the 35th pick. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Second round. Yeah.
Yeah. Out of Tennessee. I was actually thinking he was from a much smaller school than Tennessee, and then I remembered he was a highly touted recruit from Killeen.
Killeen, Texas.
His parents were stationed at Fort Hood because no one else lives in Killeen. This one's, man, I feel so bad for Chicago. Lonzo Ball is like such a perfect fit for the way that team was assembled. Mm-hmm. And you have to give them a lot of credit for getting those pieces together. They've just faced the worst luck possible. With that, and I think their moves are basically the same. I mean, I think Javon Carter's better than Patrick Beverly, but like Torrey Craig and Javonte Green are kind of washes, and you're losing Derek Jones Jr., who I think is a contributor. So I mean, they're pretty much lateral moves. They're just stuck, right? They have to re-sign their guys because that's all they can do. There's no real option for them to tank. Because I think they traded away a bunch of picks for different guys over time.
Yep.
So they're just stuck in kind of purgatory, similar to what the Trailblazers were for a while. We've talked about that a few times. They were kind of stuck in purgatory and they were able to get out. So really, unless they're able to like move Vucevic and like do something else, like they're pretty out of it in my opinion. I think you have to trash just because they need to do something. They have to commit to some option, but I think every team knows that and is like, we will give you this bag of chips for DeMar DeRozan, and they probably don't want to do that because they sell tickets. They're going to be like good enough that like they're not going to like have empty seats all the time, but they're not going to be good enough to do anything.
Right.
I think at best they're a 500 team. As currently assembled. They're just getting older and it seems like more mad at each other. So, I have to trash and I feel bad about it because a lot of it is not anything they did. It's just really bad luck.
Yep. Projected starting five going into next season: Alex Caruso, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Patrick Williams, and Nikola Vucevic. Patrick Williams will probably play like 8 games and then miss the rest of the year because that's kind of what he does, unfortunately. But that being said, I'm also going to trash the Chicago Bulls. I agree with everything you said about them being in purgatory and just really needing to do something. To me, this offseason didn't really do anything for them, right? Like Vucevic is not a center you're going to win a championship with. He's like a fourth guy on a championship team, in my opinion, potentially a third guy. Like if you get him, like if you substitute current Vucevic for Kevin Love on those Cavaliers teams, Like, do they still win a title? Probably. But he was also playing with the best player in the world at the time, right? In LeBron. So Vooch would thrive next to like if you swap Vucevic for Brook Lopez, like Vooch becomes the third, maybe fourth best player on that team, and then you still think, championship contender, right? Like he's just not a guy that really moves the needle for me. And Levine, another year removed from the injury, he's probably going to be an all-star this year. He'll probably put up crazy numbers. But that's kind of what he's done his entire career, right? Like he's been a good stats, bad team guy. I'm not sure that he's a winning basketball player. And then if you remember a lot of their wins, like last December, they went on like a 3 or 4 game winning streak where DeMar hit like 2 game winners, and then they like squeaked out an overtime winner, something like that. And that like a swing of 4 or 5 games, 3, 4, 5 games is enough to get you into the playing game in the East, right? Which is exactly where they landed with that losing record. If I were them, I might honestly take that bag of chips for DeMar DeRozan just to do something, right? Like this team, they didn't have any draft picks this year. I should have gone and looked what they had next year, but it didn't. That's on me. I'm not sure what their draft capital is going to look like going forward because, like you mentioned, they traded a bunch of picks away to get Lonzo Ball and Vucevic and DeRozan. Or well, DeRozan I think was free agency, but like they made those moves to get Lonzo Ball in the door and to get Vucevic in the door, and it's like, what do you have to show for it, right? And I understand that nobody wants to lose games, and coaches and front offices are not out there to try to actively lose, but part of winning is going through the lows so you can get to the highs, right? And I think that's something that this front office and this team probably should embrace. They should adopt some sort of the process that Philly went through, maybe not to that extreme level, but I'm with you. I trash it because, like you said, they're stuck in purgatory, and they really need no like needle moving transactions this offseason. I don't feel. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it depends on the flavor of the bag of chips you're getting.
Wow,
right?
true.
Like if you're just in, generic like Lay's. I mean, they're all right. Like sour cream and onion, I think about it for DeRozan. If it's a little spicy, maybe. I think you could blow it up and get something.
For sure, yeah. I mean, Levine would get you a first round pick. Like,
yep,
he would.
And I think you could get like a really future first round pick from like a contender for DeRozan probably if you took on a bad contract back. Like and when you're tanking, you got to be willing to do those things. That they're just Chicago is in the pantheon of like franchises, right? Mm-hmm. Like of especially modern franchises. So it's really hard for them to be like, we're going to be bad for a long time like that. So I get it. It's just I think you have to at this point, and I don't think they will. Which everyone's got jobs to keep.
For sure. The number one objective of any head coach is not to win games; it's to not lose their job.
Yep. Yeah. Hey, we're rebuilding. Oh, okay, so I'll be out of here in 3 years. Cool.
Yep, got it. Cool. Unless you're Greg Popovich.
Yeah, he's got some goodwill.
Yeah. All right, let's get to our next team here. It is, in fact, the Indiana Pacers. Last year, they were 35-47. They finished 4th in the division and missed the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. Potentially, in my opinion, the most interesting offseason of any of these teams. Probably, well, I'll save that for later. But the biggest move in this division was signing Ty Halliburton to a 5-year, $205 million max deal. He will, I think in 2 years, be up for a super max. I think that's how that works. Because this is the rookie max extension for him. Everyone remembers the trade from Sacramento with Sabonis to bring him over to Indiana. They also drafted and signed Jarris Walker. They drafted and signed Ben Shepherd. They made a trade for Obi Toppin from the Knicks, and they traded away Chris Duarte to none other than Sacramento, actually. Did I miss anything there, Ryan?
Did you say Bruce Brown?
Oh, I did. We talked about it earlier, how a certain sports page did not have it on their thing, and then I also failed to write that down. He signed a 2-year, $42 million deal, $48 million deal, something like that. He got the bag, whatever it was.
It was a lot, yeah.
It's 20+ mil per year for 2 years after winning that title, and then telling Denver he was going to come back, money be damned. Turns out money was not damned at all. It was overflowing
Yeah,
to him.
22 this year at least.
Yeah. Okay, so that being said, Ryan, splash or trash this offseason?
I think you have to splash. I think you did a good primer there talking about the moves. They basically traded Chris Duarte for Obi Toppin. They got 2 second-round picks for Duarte, then they traded 2 second-round picks for Toppin, and they have like similar contracts, so they just flipped them basically. And I think Toppin play style of dunking being his primary skill set, jumping and dunking, and that should work well with Halliburton. That seems like that would be like a good match. So I like that move. And Chris Duarte was in a very log jammed backcourt, so get him out. Plus, he's like 50. He's only been in the league for 2 years. Good for him though.
Yeah,
good for him getting drafted.
He's a good rookie.
I think he was 24 when he got drafted.
Yeah, he was.
Which is like you see that in like football players from BYU.
Brandon Whedon.
Yeah, I played minor league baseball for 5 years, and then I played football for 4, and now I'm in the league. Yeah, wild, but good for him. Jarris Walker, maybe one of my favorite picks. I think he'll be great with the Pacers. We talked about that in the draft. Ben Shepherd, I don't know how much he's going to play. He's just a shooter at this point, but you can never have too much of that. And he's an older prospect. I think he was a senior coming out of a smaller school, and they need the shooting. Bruce Brown, like Jarris Walker and Bruce Brown will probably play the exact same position. Jarris Walker is just like the grown man version of Bruce Brown. Same kind of play style, funnily enough, in a lot of ways. So I think that's good for like continuity. You can play your matchups how you want there. But yeah, I think re-signing Tyrese is probably your biggest move. Have to splash that. I like him a lot. I worry a little bit about him defensively sometimes, but just a generational passer. Has one of the ugliest shots I've ever seen, but it goes in a lot. And I think if I was going to make a bet of like who has the largest increase in wins, I think this might be the team I would take potentially. There's some teams down at the bottom I'd consider too. Just because they didn't win as many games, so it's easier to do that. But Pacers may have the largest like percentage increase. I like this team a lot. I think they're built well around Halliburton.
I agree. To all the points you said, really. I think I'm a little higher on Halliburton's defense than you, just because he has length at that position, unusual length that a lot of point guards don't have. Their projected starting 5 going to the next season: Halliburton, Ben Mathurin, Buddy Hield, who's still on the team, Jarris Walker, and Miles Turner, who's also still on the team. Signed an extension during the season. I didn't list it because it technically wasn't an off-season move, but he got an extension from them after he found out he was not being traded once again at the deadline. I love Halliburton. I did not love Mathurin. I didn't love the fit for him going into Indiana. Excuse me. I was proven wrong. They play very well together. And Ben Mathurin, if I were to describe him in one word, it would be dog. That man plays his ass off for 48 minutes a game, or as long as that coach leaves him out there. Which, Rick Carlisle, fantastic coach, right? They also have one of the best coaches in the NBA historically. I did like the Jarris Walker pick a lot. I thought the Obi Toppin trade was pretty good. You mentioned his athleticism, but he also developed a very good corner 3-point shot when he was playing for the Knicks.
Yep.
And there's a very famous phrase, "Ain't no stopping Obi Toppin." We were robbed of that Dayton Final Four run going into the 2020 March Madness tournament, because I for sure thought they were going to make the Final Four. He was candidate for National Player of the Year and an unstoppable force with the Flyers. So we kind of laid out the picks there. You gave some the transactions, not the picks. You gave some reasoning behind your splash. I will follow you in saying Splash. This is probably my favorite offseason of any group in this division. Bringing back Ty, giving him all that money, I think is the right move. He's a generational guard. I take that back. He's an extremely good guard. He's a great point guard. I don't know if he's generational, but he wants to be in Indiana. That's tough to do when you're a small market team, is find guys that really want to play for your organization and be there for a long time. He's come out publicly and said that that's where he wants to be. Seems to be like an authentic cat, but we failed to mention this in the Bucks segment. But sometimes your superstars who seem authentic and genuine and want to be there go into the media and say different things. But for now, I love the Ty signing. I like their picks. And the Obi Toppin trade is good for me. So I will also splash. I agree with your prediction of them probably being the most increased win total team. I think we all three of us picked them to crush their win total on the over during our prediction pod.
Yeah, I think they had my favorite offseason of any team, even outside the division, the whole NBA. I think they had my favorite offseason.
Yeah. It'll be really, really interesting to see how Bruce Brown fits in there and just kind of what role he plays. He may take the Buddy Hield starting position just because they're paying him all that money. But that was kind of the prediction that I had gone with there, because Buddy Hield is still a valuable member of that team, right? Honestly, they could just move Bruce Brown to the 4 and start him there over Jarris Walker if they really wanted to, because he can fit into that role, as we've seen in the past, him playing center in Brooklyn, which is wild. All right, so we both splashed them. Going down now to the last team in this division, the Detroit Pistons. They finished 17-65 last year. I believe Cade missed like 55 plus games, something like that. He didn't play a ton last year. He had that calf injury going on. So I did not include it in an offseason move, but similar to the Lonzo Ball thing, getting Cade back, I think, could be listed in their transactions, right? Like, just having him play this year is going to be such a big boost for them. They also made a huge move to sign Monty Williams. They gave him 6 years and $78.5 million, and also paid for his wife's medical treatments, which was very generous and very forthcoming of them, right, to disclose that.
Yep.
They drafted and signed Ausar Thompson in the lottery. They drafted and signed Marcus Sasser, a player that I know you're very high on. They gave an extension, rookie extension, 4 years, $6 million to Isaiah Stewart, a player they drafted. They also traded for Joe Harris from Brooklyn and Monty Morris, I believe, by way of Washington.
Yep.
Did I miss any major moves there, Ryan?
Nope, that's about it. They cut R.J. Hampton. They lost Corey Joseph.
Right.
Lost Hamidou Diallo, who some people like.
Yeah. Explosive athlete.
He is, yeah.
All right. That being said, Ryan, splash or trash this offseason?
Well, my camera looks like my brain feels right now. That's good. Art imitates life.
Honestly, you look better.
Thank you. I get that a lot. I have to put beer goggles on my girlfriend every time I come home to prevent her from being sick. I think I'm higher on it than a lot of people are. I think I'm going to buck the trend, and I'm going to say splash the off season. I think what you have to do with the Pistons is you have to work on the fringe, right? I think that they have their table setter in Cade. They have their big. They got athleticism, coming off the wing with Ausar Thompson. I still like what Ivy can do. I think they're like pretty set in those areas. You just got to work on the fringe. I think a lot of people were upset that they didn't use their cap space for like a larger transaction, but I don't think they're ready for that yet. I think taking Joe Harris is we're going to kick the can down the road to next season. And, Monty Morris, I think, will be a contributor. But Joe Harris, taking on his contract and kicking the money down the road, I think is a smart move a lot of people are mad saying they want them to push immediately for a playoff, and they may still do that organically. Uh, what was out there this year that was going to that you wanted to pay for? Are you going to do like the Rockets and pay Dylan Brooks a lot of money? Like I don't think that would be smart for them. It made more sense for the Rockets to do that.
Right.
There just wasn't a lot for them to do. So I think taking on guys, getting extra picks to eventually try to make a move later, either for a free agent or a guy who wants out. Once you've established yourself as a contender, I like it. I think it gives them a lot of flexibility, and they're just hoping they grow within that flexibility with their young guys. So.
Yep. Projected starting five going into next year: Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Oscar Thompson. The four, I was kind of torn between Stewart and Bogdanovich. That kind of a toss up there. Whoever Monty Williams decides to go with, they did just give Stewart that money, so I would assume they probably lean his direction. And then Jalen Duren starting at the five is the most likely scenario there in my mind. I did not include the Wiseman trade. Once again, that was a deadline move, not an offseason move. However, it does play a role going into next season. He's another asset they have at their disposal if you choose to view him that way. I did not realize that you thought that people were down on this offseason because I'm going to splash it. I like the offseason. I like the Thompson pick after watching him play in the summer league. I did not know what to think of him, right? I kind of went in with neutral feelings. And then I thought that he played very well, right? His athleticism carried over to NBA courts as opposed to playing, 17, 18, 19-year-olds. But watching him move the way that he does and his basketball IQ, I think that he'll be a contributing player. If nothing else, he's not going to be a bad player, right? They have a lot of depth in their point guard position as well as their center position. I think that you can kind of fill in the cracks everywhere between that with guys that you pick up not necessarily off the scrap heap, but you can make moves, you can sign free agents, stuff like that. But if you have front court and backcourt depth, specifically at the 1 and 5, I think you're off to a good start, right? And we all on this podcast really like Jalen Duren, I believe. We all think he's going to be a stud. And we're all obviously very high on Cade, but it's injury dependent for him at this point. I like the Joe Harris trade. Joe Harris was lights out in Brooklyn when he played there. Obviously, he's battled injury the last 2 seasons, but there's nothing you can really do about that. We're only predicting going forward, and going forward, you don't want to predict injuries, right? So I think that he fits in very nicely to what they're trying to do there. If he can be a not net negative defender, I think he'll definitely be a net negative or a net positive on the offensive end of the court, which is something that they struggled to do last year, was score a lot of points and provide exterior shooting to those bigs that I talked about. They do have Marvin Bagley on this team, which will give them a bump because he went to Duke. So that just makes sense. I mean, that's just a scientific fact. I'm not sure how you dispute that. But for all those reasons that I laid out there and you so eloquently laid out through your blurry camera lens, we both splashed this team. And I think that's the correct choice there. So that kind of concludes, unless Ryan, you have more thoughts on Detroit.
No, I was just going to say I've seen a lot of people say they wish they did more.
Okay.
I just don't think I don't think this offseason was a great position to do that, like I said.
Right. For sure.
It's like in a vacuum, it would be great if they could sign a max guy who's just going to come in and make them a playoff team right away. But like, that's just not how the world works. People have contracts and stuff.
Yeah. And I believe Joe Harris is on the last year of his deal. So,
and it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, he's like $19 million or something like that, if I remember correctly. He's a guy that they could potentially look to move to a contender if somebody wants a rotational guy on an expiring contract, then they could probably get a pick back for that, right?
Yep, that's why I liked it.
Yeah, it was a good move for them. I thought it was a very, very, cascading effects within that move.
Yeah, he makes just under 20, 19.9.
Nailed it.
And this is his last year.
I know my white shooters. Let me tell you what.
Yeah,
Not
he
a
went
not
to
a Duke guy. Yeah, I was gonna say if only went to Duke. He did go to UVA, so I guess he just wasn't smart enough to get into Duke. I can't hold that against him.
Yeah, it's right down the street. He could have worked harder.
That is true. That is true. All right. So for recaps here, you and I both splashed the Bucks offseason. I believe you splashed the Cavs offseason, and I trashed the Cavs offseason.
Yep.
We both trashed the Bucks or the Bulls offseason. Excuse me. We both splashed the Pacers and the Pistons both. So we really only had one that we kind of went opposite directions on there, and that was the Cavaliers. Right? Do you think that they are a better team going into next year? You have to say no, right? Because you kind of trashed their offseason.
Oh, that's a different question. I do think they will be a better team. As I've said many times on here, progression is not linear. Development's not linear, right? Evan Mobley may not get any better. It's a distinct possibility. It's unlikely, but it's a distinct possibility. But I think just natural progression, they'll be a better team. I think they'll grow among themselves. I just think, like, on paper, they're about the same.
That's fair. I tend to agree with that. I would say that they're going to be a better team, and we'll revisit this as the season gets closer with win totals and projections and stuff like that. But 51 is a lot of wins. I think when we did our prediction, I took them to win around the same number. I think I was between like 49 and 53.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't like the offseason. I'm not sure it inhibits their progress as a team.
Yep. Yeah, they're in a good spot. Young and good. That helps.
Yeah, very much so. I don't love their coach though. I'm not a big fan of
really
old buddy whose name I can't think of right now. JB Bickerstaff, right? I believe it's JB.
Yep, Bernie's son.
Yeah, Bernie Bickerstaff's son. Yeah, he's not my favorite coach in the NBA. I thought he got out coached in the playoffs. They probably should have won their series against the Knicks, but.
I always liked him. He was an assistant coach with the Rockets for a long time. I always liked him. But, of course, how much do you know about a guy being an assistant coach of a team? So.
Yeah, I mean, Steve Kerr was the assistant coach at Team USA, and we see how that worked out for us. Coaches are supposed to do more with less, okay? That's how you determine the merit of a coach. All right? Yeah. More with less. And he did less with less.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Do you have parting thoughts or any shout-outs or anything you'd like to get off your chest here to the fine folks at home or in the car, wherever they may be?
Oh, look at that. I fixed my camera by getting
just
close to it. Yes. I don't have anything to say. I know that this is a weird time of year for basketball. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of other sports going on that we all are paying attention to. I'm a big soccer fan, so I'm paying attention to that and, football and all that. So, yeah, we just appreciate anybody who listens to this so deep into the off season. But I think it's a good time to talk about the things you wouldn't normally talk about during the season when the media gets really involved with everything.
Yes.
So, yeah, I appreciate anybody who listens. Glad I can be here to talk.
I agree. It's a wonderful time always talking ball with you boys. Like Ryan said, we really appreciate all the folks that tune in and listen to us ramble on about things that we know nothing about, truthfully. Off-season basketball, who knows anything about that? My final parting words to the people tonight will be Vikings plus 5.5. Take it. Take the money line at plus 210 if you can. Go Vikings. Suck it, Eagles. You're not that good. You're overrated.
That's what I was worried about, right? Is week one an aberration and like the Eagles, because the Eagles didn't look good after the first quarter. They looked bad, and I'm not sure they looked really that great in the first quarter. There was just a lot of turnovers that led to them looking good. So, is that what they actually are, or is it what they were the year before, or something in between? Probably something in between. But Minnesota could definitely give them problems with that offense.
What I can tell you with certainty is that their defensive line is very, very good.
Yes.
But they lost Nakobe Dean to injury, and I think 3 of their 4 starters in the secondary are also out with injury tonight. And I know that Kevin O'Connell is going to move Justin Jefferson around to get him off of Darius Slay. I know that because we looked up who the Vikings coach is before this podcast, and it is Kevin O'Connell and not Kevin Stefanski. I would expect to see Justin Jefferson moved around to get him off of Darius Slay. But that's a different podcast for a different time. So to those still here, thank you so much. This has been another off-season edition of Backyard Buckets brought to you by Backyard Sports. We are out.